The last 3 games, Williams has had 23 straight possessions without a touchdown. The Bears haven't scored a touchdown since October 27th at Washington. The NFL's 6 black head coaches have some work to do. After Week 10, they have a combined record of 28-30. 3 of the 6 black head coaches are under 500. New England's Gerard Mayo, Tampa Bay's Todd Bowles, and the Raiders' Antonio Pierce. The Clippers lost at Oklahoma City last night. OKC's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander dropped a career-high 45. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Beloved Entertainment and the Miracle Theater Foundation presents Sweet Spot Live with KBLA's own Angelique Francis, Sunday, November 17th. Angelique is live on stage featuring storytellers from the community, colorful and provocative, for us and by us, celebrating our strength and our fire. Come hang out with us as we walk through our neighborhoods, even down our dark alleys, because just around the corner, there's laughter, misplaced miracles, unspeakable pain, and yes, forgiveness. It's all happening Sunday, November 17th, 4 p.m. at the Miracle Theater in Inglewood, 226 South Market Street. Last year, audiences raved. Best show in decades. An unforgettable night. Groundbreaking. Sweet Spot Live was thought-provoking and enlightening. Standing ovations begging for more. Please, more. It was a great night. So back by popular demand, it's Sweet Spot Live with Angelique Francis. Get your tickets right now at themiracleinglewood.com. That's themiracleinglewood.com. We'll see you in the sweet spot.
I'm just trying to process what just happened. I'm just trying to express what I'm feeling when the pressure gets too intense. Burn some incense. Stop and take a deep breath. Release that. Holding it back like a slingshot. Ayy, holding it back like head ties. Ayy, pulling my shirt, just let me go. Oh, clocking the drill, stopping the flow. You already know what time it is, don't need a Rolex. Do you see the sign? Tell me, do I need to protest? Oh, you always keep on slowing up the progress. Got me losing nights, guess I'm going through the process. I got some things that I gotta get off my chest. Screaming through the phone like we're trying to have a contest.
KBLA Talk 1580. Just trying to process it all. Well, look, Beloved Entertainment and the Miracle Theater Foundation are presenting the Sweet Spot Live with KBLA's own very talented Angelique Francis. It's this Sunday, November 17th. Angelique will be live on stage featuring storytellers from the community. It's colorful, it's provocative. It's all happening this Sunday at 4 p.m. at the Miracle Theater in Inglewood. That's 226 South Market Street. You can get your tickets now at themiracleinglewood.com. That's themiracleinglewood.com. But we also have a pair of tickets right now for caller 15, as in 1580, caller 15, 800-920-1580, 800-920-1580. The Sweet Spot Live will be a great way to process, unpack, relax, and fellowship with your friends from KBLA Talk 1580. So pleased to welcome into the conversation this morning a researcher, author, and professor at the Department of Sociology at the University of California, Berkeley. She's a faculty director of the Berkeley Interdisciplinary Migration Initiative. She got her PhD in sociology from USC, and she specializes in the study of international migration and immigrant integration, with particular interest on the experiences of Latin American origin immigrants and their descendants in the United States. Dr. Stephanie Canizales, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for stopping in with us for the hour. It's much appreciated. This has got to be sort of an insane and busy moment in history for you specifically.
Yeah, and you said when you came back that you're trying to process it all, and it is, I'm of two minds. I'm trying to process it as an academic, but also just as a human being in my body that's lived this before. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
When you say in your body that's lived this before, what is the live this before part?
Lived this Trump a version of it before, and trying to remember what I felt like every day, the anxiety, the stress. Someone asked me yesterday, what's your plan for keeping up with the news? And I really can't remember how I did it last time. But I know that it's going to be nonstop for a really long time. And just trying to prepare myself again. I have to survive it, we have to survive it.
Yeah, I was thinking last time that we should start a news channel where like actors read what the president said so we don't have to listen to his voice. Where like they give you the news, but you never have to see or hear the president. I think that would be wildly popular with me. But anyway, certainly it feels like migration, immigration, deportation is much more top of the conversation than it was in 2016 when Trump was elected the first time.
Yeah, I was thinking about this actually this morning, that the first time around was the wall, right? It was still just at the supposed threat was still at the borders. And now, going as far as saying the enemy within, which can include non-immigrants also, but the idea that it could be anyone just immediately around you and that the interior is the threat and the people in the interior, I think escalates it and brings it in closer proximity, which would, of course, stoke much more anxiety for people who aren't following actual migration trends or actual rates of crime in immigrant communities or contributions to the economy, that sort of thing. It's all just really abstract, but also fearfully close, right? If all you're listening to is Trump and his administration.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the first time he did talk about Mexico sending their murderers or whatever that racist stuff that he was saying, and he did talk about building a wall, which is still not built. Mexico paying for it, which did not happen. But it seems much more centered right now. I don't remember talk about deporting 20 million people, which is interesting considering most estimates say there are 11 or 12 million immigrants and migrants and undocumented persons in the United States. What do you make of that?
Yeah, there's one thing I think about when I hear this non-citizens, right? These non-citizens or these illegals, that also widens the net. To be a non-citizen, you can be a legal permanent resident. You can have temporary protected status. You can have DACA. And I think the sort of normalization of the widened net, right? This broader cast of people that are now included in, again, what is the threat narrative, almost normalizing that in everyday life, I think is something that we need to pay attention to, because it's one thing to walk around saying undocumented peoples, and it's another thing to say non-citizens very broadly. And I think that makes, again, a larger group of people more vulnerable. And also the idea that if we don't want to be separated from our potentially deported family members, that then citizens can go with them and we'll deport the whole family. Also, again, widens the net and increases the number of people that are at risk in this next go around.
So many questions coming out of what you just said. One of which is the role of, they are talking about repealing birthright citizenship, which means that if you come to this country and you have a child here, that child is not necessarily a citizen anymore, and it can mean a lot of other things. I keep trying to alert folks that is just a foot in the door to a kind of authoritarian designation about who is allowed to be a citizen and who is not.
Yeah. I mean, that that would include me, right? So I find it sort of interesting. I'm not sure that I'm processing all of this very well. Again, I'm trying to wrap my head around what I already knew. I've done work over the past 6 years with service providers, people working with asylum-seeking children in the U.S. And what I've heard a lot of people say is that they hadn't really processed the first Trump administration, and they were sort of catching up with the fallout as it impacted children's lives and over these last 4 years. So the fact that we're about to start up something new and that is promised to be much more intense and violent, I think it puts us in a position where we haven't really reconciled a lot of the legal violence that has come down on our communities and the people we most care about. So I'm not sure that I'm really caught up with what I'm supposed to be thinking or feeling in this moment. But I think you're right that the again, widening the net of who is considered a threat, U.S.-born children of undocumented immigrants are now disqualified. And while my parents were naturalized in the U.S., I am a U.S.-born daughter of what were undocumented immigrants at one point.
Right. So do your parents come as unaccompanied minors, or how does that figure into your story? Because your parents came, they came here without papers. And as you said, they became naturalized, and then obviously you were born here.
Yeah. My parents grew up in Los Angeles as unaccompanied children, and I mean that, and I explain this in my book, Sin Padres Ni Papeles. I mean that in the sense not just, apprehended at the border as unaccompanied children. My parents were not apprehended at the U.S.-Mexico border, but they grew up emotionally, socially, economically unaccompanied by an adult caregiver. My dad arrived in the U.S. when he was 17 years old, first in his family to migrate to Los Angeles, and he grew up as a low-wage worker here in California. And my mom had relatives living in the U.S., had friends of her mother who stayed in El Salvador, but was, again, emotionally and socially unaccompanied, in that there wasn't anyone that was necessarily looking out for her. So my mom does talk about having to enroll herself in school at 13 years old, having to figure out the bus route. And I talk about a sort of coming of age as an unaccompanied person with no adult caregiver in the room really telling you what you're supposed to be doing.
Sin padres ni papeles means without parents or papers. In case you were wondering, that's the name of Dr. Canizales' first book. And, I'm sure you're aware of this. We'll talk about it when we come forward and continue this conversation. I'm going to give you a second to think about it here. I think there's a real backlash right now, especially with Black Americans, because until we see receipts showing that, Trump cheated, which is certainly a possibility, it appears that Latinos en masse voted for Trump. And what I'm hearing, and even, thinking about myself, is like immigrants, undocumented folks, Latino community that aren't undocumented, rely on Black Americans to show up for them when their kids are being put in cages at the border, or when, they want sanctuary cities, or when they want someone to march for their rights. But when it comes time to stand up for us, to whether it's affirmatively in voting for a Black woman for president, or whether it's defensively in trying to stave off white supremacist authoritarianism in the new Confederate Trump administration, y'all don't show up. So what does that mean? What does that mean for coalition building? What does that mean for Black Americans and Latino Americans moving forward? We'll look at that when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
Febreze.
As a rideshare driver, I love keeping my car smelling fresh and clean. So when I'm driving, I only trust Febreze car vent clips, featuring 3 distinct intensity settings, because it's that little touch that sets me apart. I can turn the intensity down for subtle freshness, or I can turn it up for when I want lots of scent. So whether it's set to low, medium, or high, with Febreze car, I know my car's going to smell amazing. Which keeps my driver rating right where it belongs. Picking up Oscar!
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. If you need help getting your resume in order, finding job training, or landing a job, we've got 3 great options for you. First, the City of Los Angeles has WorkSource centers across the area offering free job support. The California Workforce Development Board can help you with everything from GED prep to vocational training at no cost to you. On the federal level, the Department of Labor's American Job Centers offer a full range of services for job seekers and businesses alike. Visit careeronestop.org, or for more info, just call California's Help Center or visit cwdb.ca.gov or call 916-657-1440. For the City of Los Angeles programs, go to ewdd.lacity.gov or call 213-744-7300. All these services are free to help you get your next job. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
An official message from Medicare.
Couple more minutes and we'll start this month's book club.
You know, I usually love a plot twist, but this year I'm comparing my options during Medicare open enrollment.
You can't assume your current health or drug plan is the best one for you.
And you gotta make sure your drugs are covered. That's important.
So is saving money.
Review all your options at Medicare.gov. Open enrollment ends December 7th. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues?
Who are you?
Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Tips to help improve your credit score in 2024. Establishing credit is an important key to achieving financial health, but building a credit history from scratch can feel challenging since you need credit to build credit. First, what does it mean to build credit? All consumers have a score between 300 and 850. You want your score to be as high as possible as lenders look at your credit score to make loan and credit decisions. A good credit score shows you have a track record of borrowing money responsibly. Remember, it's never too late to build or rebuild your credit. This segment is sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase & Company.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
Dr. Stephanie Canizales is an author, a researcher, a PhD, and she's joining us today, an expert on migration, and so many questions to ask. But I think this trend that I'm seeing is not just on social media, it's in real life, and it's not just Black Americans, it's also Latinos that are, second, third generation that are kind of like, forget y'all. You're not there for us, or this is what you voted for, this is what you get. How do you respond to that?
I have a hard time with the attention that's being given to Latinos as perhaps being at fault for the outcome or somehow being more traitorous in these political arenas than other ethno-racial groups. When we look at the exit poll numbers, white men and women overwhelmingly voted for Trump, and the attempt to explain away which group made this outcome so. And we sort of take for granted that, of course, white people would vote for Trump, and not really questioning why that is the outcome, but really focusing on as you mentioned, the Latino men and women. I want to point out that a majority of Latinos, according to the exit polls, 53% of Latino men and 59% of Latino women voted for Kamala Harris. And if
Okay, that doesn't match the polling that I'm seeing. Just and you know, it may be different polling, but that's not matching the polling that I'm seeing. And I agree with you about the division and finger pointing, but I mean, on this show, we certainly have been talking a lot about white women who claim to be so concerned about Dobbs. Majority voted for Trump.
Yeah. What I was going to say was that in terms of the Latino vote, I think it is really important to put the voter trends, the political trends in context, and particularly the white supremacist global capitalist context that is the United States, and that Latinos for a long time have been trained to want to approximate whiteness as a protective strategy of themselves and their communities. And part of how that plays out is wanting to separate themselves individually, their families collectively, or their communities from what is being framed as the threat, and approximating the good immigrant or the good Latino is one of the ways that social scientists have found over and over that people are really trying to separate themselves from what is the Latino threat narrative in the United States. And voting is just one of the actions that people take, I think, a lot of the time in order to make that tangible approximation, right? It isn't just the way they speak, the way they dress, the neighborhoods that they live in, but really wanting to vote practically in a way that approximates them to what is being framed in the U.S. media or in public discourse as the American value.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of conversations we've had about the census, where people fault certain Latino groups for checking the white box on the census. And I always say, if you thought that you could check a box and you would get white privilege, wouldn't you check it? Even though that turns out to be a big fat lie. If you thought you could just select the white, benefits package, and then that's what you would get, you might even do it too.
Right, or that people walk around forming identities that are based on various scales of society. They might be called the güero, the white one in their family, right? Or the whitewashed one in their family. And they might feel in their particular micro context of the world that they are American or whitened, but put in a larger context, there are places where in, Latin or Latino community spaces where I'm not brown enough, right? But then I am in a white space and I am the Latina, or people ask me, do you study unaccompanied, undocumented young people because you are undocumented, right? There's all these sort of assumptions that are made about who I am when I occupy different spaces. So again, when people show up to a voting booth, they are both themselves in their micro worlds, and they're also negotiating what it means to be relating to the person they see on their TV screen, right?
Yeah, I mean, understood. I know that the Latino communities are diverse and divergent. It's a lot of different countries. And some people think I'm Latino because I speak Spanish, but no, I'm just a nosy African American who at one time was married to a Cuban and, likes to be able to know what's going on in her household, etc. But
again, protective strategies.
Protective strategies. But I mean, even within the Latino community, and it's not talked about as much in mainstream or any circles here, but there is that shadeism that you refer to. I know plenty of Latinos that use the term white-tino, for Latino folks who can pass.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, the nicknames that were given in our families, Prieta being like the darker complected one, right? Or my grandpa would call one of my siblings piel de canela, cinnamon skin. And it's like affectionate, but it's also pointing out that you are darker than the other people around the table. And I think that points to, now I'm remembering something I would hear in my family a lot, this idea that you have to better the race, mejorar la raza. When you marry someone that is, again, approximating whiteness or whiter than us. So I think there are all of these things that these behaviors, beliefs, practices that we enact in everyday life that are a reflection of the need to survive a certain structure that devalues, demonizes, vilifies, and really attempts to paint certain communities as good and others as bad. And we all want to feel like we are on the good side, right? We all want to say, they're not talking about us, right? So I have a dad who migrated at 17, undocumented Salvadoran kid who can watch the news and it resonates with him that there are people that are doing it the wrong way. And I have to look at him and say, by all measures, you did it the wrong way. The outcome was desirable, right? It is the desirable outcome that he got citizenship, owns a home, that all his kids went to college. All of those sort of ripple effects ended up being positive, but the original point of entry was a violation of what is American security as it is framed now. But he sees himself as having done it the right way or being a good immigrant, right? And that there's a disconnect, and it's about really self-preservation in a very threatening state.
But then if, as an African American, and I know this is one of the things that the Trump administration successfully exploited, when we hear those stories, okay, our ancestors worked for 12 generations with no pay. We are vilified and demonized. Mm-hmm. We do not get any kind of assistance. In fact, many times we are blocked. And when we do get a house or a business, it is taken from us. So that story doesn't always sound so wonderful to a Black American who has experienced that, or whose ancestors has experienced that, and then the perception is, you're jumping over Black folks who built the foundation of civil rights in this country.
Yeah. I agree, and it's when we're being told by leaders, or we're being told by these elite people in power that there is a scarcity of resources, right? When we're being told there is a deficit of resources, a deficit of jobs and opportunities and wealth, then we look at each other like saying, you don't deserve that. My community has been doing this for longer, and it sort of blurs the fact that we all deserve dignity, that wrongs have been wrong and reparations are due, but that the people in power then pit us against one another is really approaching our society and the organization of our society as if it were natural, that this is the way to do it, and this is how the chips fall, and we all have to fight for the crumbs of the pie, but people are eating entire pies, and no one is questioning, not no one is questioning, but, as we are sort of fighting amongst one another, it obscures that the true threat is coming from above, and that wealthy elites in power that are creating this narrative that there is, a deficit of resources are really steering the conversation and steering the wealth further in their direction, right?
Yep. We've got a hard stop here for news, traffic, and sports. Can't wait to talk further with Dr. Stephanie Canizales. What are we being told that's true, and what are we missing that's true about migration, immigration in the United States at this moment in time? KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know from BIN News. The Kremlin denies that President-elect Trump and President Putin spoke after the U.S. election, calling reports of the call pure fiction. News sources had claimed Trump advised Putin not to escalate the war in Ukraine. Republicans are closing in on maintaining control of the House. According to NBC News, the GOP is 5 seats away from the 218 needed to control the lower chamber. President Biden says the country has a sacred obligation to those who have served and their families. He marked his final Veterans Day as Commander-in-Chief at Arlington National Cemetery Monday morning. He and Vice President Harris took part in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And veteran homelessness rates are down to a record low. The Biden administration announced on Veterans Day that there were less than 33,000 homeless veterans as of January 2024. That's more than a 55% decrease since 2010. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice: continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Rams couldn't find their offense Monday night against Miami. They lost 23-15 at SoFi. No touchdowns for the Rams. All of their points came on field goals. The Rams dropped to 4-5. They're at New England on Sunday. Former USC quarterback Caleb Williams is having a rough time with the Chicago Bears, who have lost 3 in a row. Over the last 3 games, Williams has had 23 straight possessions without a touchdown. The Bears haven't scored a touchdown since October 27th at Washington. The NFL's 6 black head coaches have some work to do. After Week 10, they have a combined record of 28-30. 3 of the 6 black head coaches are under 500. New England's Gerard Mayo, Tampa Bay's Todd Bowles, and the Raiders' Antonio Pierce. The Clippers lost at Oklahoma City last night. OKC's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander dropped a career-high 45. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
With reported hate crimes rising in recent years, California has responded through outreach efforts across state government and in collaboration with community-based organizations for the launch of CA versus Hate. This non-emergency, multilingual hate crime and incident reporting hotline provides an anonymous reporting option for victims and witnesses of hate acts reported in 15 different languages through the online portal and in over 200 languages when calling the hotline. Report anonymously by calling 833-866-4283. Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. or online at any time at cavshate.org.
In California, the use of man-made stone is causing workers to get silicosis. Silicosis is a fatal disease caused by breathing in silica dust from cutting, polishing, or grinding man-made stone. To prevent silicosis, employers must provide their workers proper equipment, including water systems and NIOSH-approved respirators. Stop dusty and deadly practices. Learn more at worksafewithsilica.org. This is a message from Cal OSHA.
Whoa, it's you, the Capital One Bank guy.
That's what they call me.
Mind if I get a selfie?
Yeah, sure thing. Say no fees or minimums on your Capital One checking account.
Wow, that's a keeper. So, where are you heading?
I'm off to spread the good news that Capital One helps people keep more money in their wallet with no overdraft fees.
Oh, you're the best Capital One Bank guy.
Hey, mind if I get a selfie?
Sure.
Say, Capital One, what's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
Are you an entrepreneur looking to take your business to new heights? KBLA Talk 1580 is your partner in success. Every day, we celebrate and elevate black-owned businesses across our community. Our KBLA SMB Marketplace currently features The Cookie Dip, Badass Bakes, Hair Concoction, Higher Education Accreditation Consulting, LACC Radiology Technology Department, and Malik Books. Your business deserves to be heard. Let KBLA Talk 1580 amplify your voice and connect you with our powerful community of listeners. Email smb@kbla1580.com today. That's smb@kbla1580.com. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
This is the story of the one who, as a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, knows that vintage charm historically needs constant attention. Which is why when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them. The right tools and supplies are never far away. So the one can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Our daughter Jessie loves playing detective.
A clue.
But since we discovered she has sensitive skin, we've been playing detective too.
We thought the problem was our puppy.
But it was actually our old detergent.
Aha.
So we switched to Tide Free and Gentle. Tide cleans better than the leading competitive free detergent, and it doesn't leave behind irritating residues.
Plus, Tide Free and Gentle has no dyes or perfumes, so it's gentle on her skin.
Case closed.
If it's got to be clean, it's got to be Tide Free and Gentle.
Join the Black Hollywood Education and Resource Center for a great day in Black Hollywood. Friday, November 15th, 7 p.m. at the Regal LA Live Theaters, downtown Los Angeles. This is the opening night celebration of the 30th annual S.E. Manley African American Short Film Showcase, honoring Deborah Pratt, Lyndon Barrios, Janine Sherman Barrios, Art Sims, Dee Stevens, Gina Lemieux Davis, and Dr. Gloria Zervine. The weekend continues on Saturday, November 16th and November 17th with over 60 short films and industry panels on careers in Hollywood and directors on directing. Get your tickets today at bherc.org or call 323-957-4656. Again, 323-957-4656. See you there. That's bherc.org.
Heard any other talk radio lately that sounds anything like this? We didn't think so. You're listening to Unapologetically Progressive, KBLA Talk 1580.
Oh, my. And we are talking with Dr. Stephanie Canizales, a researcher, author, and professor in the Department of Sociology at the University of California at Berkeley. She's faculty director of the Berkeley Interdisciplinary Migration Initiative. I want to ask about the misconceptions and the truth versus the stereotypes of what's going on with migration. But before that, I want to follow up on something you said going into news, traffic, and sports. You were referencing, the struggles of Black folks and my question about coalitions and solidarity, given our perception that Latino voters abandoned us at the polls this season. Whether or not, the data bear that out, whether or not it turns out that Trump and Musk cheated, we don't know. But as it stands right now. And you mentioned reparations. Were you talking about reparations for Black Americans, or were you talking about repair in a more general sense? And I think it's an important question. We do Freedman Friday every Friday here. We focus on reparations. And as Black Americans, it's of particular importance that folks stand in solidarity with us around that issue.
Yes, I am of the mind that Black Americans, descendants of enslaved peoples, are deserving of reparations because it is a question of equity and access to opportunity in the U.S. And yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, well said. I mean, I think it's a point of clarity. Because someone was saying back here many times, it feels like we're always kind of put last. Our issues are put last, and other folks are like not as quick to speak up. So I'm glad to hear you say that. Let's talk about perception versus reality when it comes to migration trends. I know that's pretty much your body of research, so that's like a giant question for you. But some of the, I guess what I'd like is to tackle some of the talking points that we hear with perception versus reality right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you want to go down a list of myths?
I mean, I can be more specific, but I'm sure you probably have more knowledge of it than I do. So yeah, a list would be great.
Well, I think some of the really big sort of misconceptions are that there is a migration crisis that is about the flow of, or I don't like using the word flow because it gives a sort of visual, right? But the trends of migration itself, when in fact the crisis is manufactured, it is made by policy, it is made by policies that meter migrants or that attempt to lower the number of asylum admissions every year, and it creates a sort of feeling of overflow when the system is really built and being sort of reconstructed each year in a way that is meant to contain less people. When trends of displacement show that there are environmental crises, there are economic crises, there are natural disasters, there's weak education and government infrastructure, therefore people are migrating. Environmental crisis, we know, is also in part man-made. So this idea that people are creating a crisis in their arrival, I think, is a really big misconception. That immigrants are inherently more criminal or deviant than the native-born population is simply not true. We know that densely immigrant communities have lower crime rates, and that is in part tied to what we were saying earlier about, wanting to approximate a good immigrant narrative, a good immigrant frame. There is a clear understanding in the work that I've read on the topic. I don't particularly study this, but there's a clear understanding of what it means to be deportable in the very racially constructed sense, right? That there are actions, something like running through a stop sign could get someone flagged locally and then deported nationally, and that there is collaboration between local and federal governments and law enforcement agencies in making that, from a run, we call them California rolls, right? Like you just kind of roll through a stop sign. That can get someone deported, a whole family separated. So people are exceptionally cautious then to not do a thing that would get them potentially separated from their families. And that ranges from everything from the way they dress, the way they speak, how carefully they drive, who they engage with in their local communities to ensure that they are not committing any sort of exception to the law, right, that could threaten them and their families. Things like, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but things like that, the immigrants don't, and documented immigrants don't contribute to the economy when there are millions of dollars contributed locally, sales taxes, ITIN numbers, the tax ID numbers that even undocumented people apply for and use to get jobs and to pay into their taxes. There were undocumented young people in my research actually who had arrived as unaccompanied children and were growing up as garment workers, as restaurant workers in Los Angeles. And by the time I was leaving the field site after 6 years of research, many of the young people that I had started speaking with when they were 17, 18, 19, and were well into their 20s, were learning about ITIN numbers and these tax ID numbers that they could then start to bank a record of their work in the U.S. and maybe one day qualify for legal status or some kind of legal protection. That is children doing that work, right? So, and then the everyday myth of, the solution is, and this is really abstract and very high level, but that the solution is punishment, that the solution is taking a punitive approach, that deportation or that building a higher wall is somehow going to deter people from coming to the U.S. or being in the U.S. When research shows time and time again that it is the conditions of displacement, it is the conditions of the origin country that are the root causes of migration, and that it is the conditions of work and life in the U.S. that makes it so that people cannot go back, right? So many of my young the youth workers that I interviewed in Los Angeles talked about wanting to go home still as teenagers after 3, 4, 5 years in the U.S. But because of border enforcement, the inability to return, not knowing if there would be economic or educational opportunities in their origin country, they stayed in the U.S. longer. So punishing people is not the solution. Providing more opportunities for integration, for well-being, for mobility is a better start in making people mobile, both socially, economically mobile, but also physically mobile. If we really hope for people to return to their origin countries and not come back to the U.S. later, let's create opportunities for people to set up their lives in a way that would not allow them to uproot, would not force them to uproot themselves, right? And a lot of people do not want to be uprooted, but it is, again, a survival strategy.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about what makes a person deportable, because this idea, which is very prevalent in the Trump administration, that we're going to deport the criminals, a lot of people don't realize that by criminals they mean many times the violation is coming here, right? The violation is an actual immigration violation. It's not that they held up a store or, knocked someone over the head. It's that they came here, and that was a violation. And that's my understanding. Is that, does your research support that?
I don't do research in this area, but I would say that yes, there's research that supports that. The violations, I'm thinking now of Mata Armenta's work on law enforcement policing in the immigrant community. Violations can really be anything, right? Filling out a paperwork, a form incorrectly because you don't speak the English language and you say that you qualify for a benefit or a service that you don't qualify for. Truancy of your U.S.-born child in school and a misunderstanding of truancy policies in school, right? All kinds of things that are just, I tell my students, we walk around calling people illegals. I don't walk around doing that, but the general sort of term that is used is illegals, and because of this unauthorized act of migration. And I say, how many of you jaywalk? Do we call you that is unauthorized, right? How many of you make U-turns in the middle of the street? How many people have stolen a lip balm from Target when you were a child, right? Do we call people illegals because of things that they do that are unauthorized? And I think that is something that we miss, that there are policies, socially, legally constructed policies that are put in place, and people can misunderstand them. People can just accidentally fall into these things. Or again, I just keep going back to the fact that structures create conditions in which people are forced to do what they need to do to survive. Poverty causes people to do things that they wouldn't normally do if they had resources and the ability to stay, the ability to eat, to be housed, to be warm, to be safe. And then we fault people for doing the thing they need to do to survive instead of looking at what we're doing, not only to create the condition in the first place as a society, but as local, regional, federal governments to not create systems that lift people out of those conditions in the longer term.
Talking with Dr. Stephanie Canizales. We'll continue the conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
This season, Chevy brings classic pairings, cookies and milk, mistletoe and kisses, and your holiday plans and a new Chevy. Silverado 1500 gives you power and capability with 430 pound-feet of torque to haul your holiday tree. The Equinox EV and all-new Equinox, America's best compact SUV for new vehicle quality by J.D. Power, offer both confidence and style to see you through the holiday season. It's easy to see why Chevy makes everything better and brighter. Find your red tag. Get 0% APR financing for 36 months on select popular Chevy models when you finance with GM Financial. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Award based on 2024 models for J.D. Power 2024 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information. Visit jdpower.com/awards. Offer available on all 2025 Equinox and 2024 Silverado, Equinox EV, Blazer EV, and Silverado EV models. Monthly payment is $28.60 for every $1,000 refinance. Example down payment is 22.2%. Must finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available with lease and some other offers. Take new retail delivery by 12/2/23.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Autopsy Initiative provides a second autopsy free of charge for victims' families who have lost their loved ones due to a police-related death. The services offered through the initiative include the completion of a second autopsy, disclosure of preliminary findings, and a final autopsy report. A police-related death is when an individual is harmed by police officers using deadly force, which results in an individual's death. Police-related death includes in-custody deaths, including those that arise during contact with law enforcement officers during arrest, pursuit, booking, transport, or incarceration. The Autopsy Initiative has a team of board-certified pathologists on call. An autopsy request may be completed by anyone with a close relationship with the victim, which may include the victim's spouse, partner, relative, close friend, or lawyer. To request a free second autopsy for a victim of police violence, please visit knowyourrightscamp.com. That's knowyourrightscamp.com. Then click on Autopsy, then click on Request. At KBLA, we believe in justice for victims of police violence. We say their names, and we don't black down. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
Indeed. We're talking with Dr. Stephanie Canizales. She is a researcher, an author, and a professor in the Department of Sociology at UC Berkeley, faculty director of the Berkeley Interdisciplinary Migration Initiative. One of the things that you also do, Dr. Canizales, is try to apply facts, research, and your knowledge to influence or inform, I guess, policy. You worked with the Department of Health and Human Services as a resident scholar and a UNICEF USA research consultant. Over and over again in all of these debates about immigration, asylum, et cetera, I feel like there is a lack of understanding or acknowledgement that we have never had an effective, clear, and consistent immigration policy, or non-racist immigration policy in the United States of America. I don't know if you can speak to that, but I feel like one of the things we need to add to the public discourse is an understanding of what could or should be, what would actually make sense if we were to do such as that.
Yeah, the immigration policy, yes, I just am, like I said, just trying to process all of this in real time. And part of it is that, we have been here, we have been in this position for so long, over and over again, and we sort of treat the immigration crisis again, something that I think is historically politically made in the U.S. We treat it as a surprise every election cycle, and it's not, right? It's not a surprise to anyone who has been paying attention, and it's not a surprise if you know immigration policy, which I don't fault people for not knowing because it is so obscure. But one of the issues is that we tend to think about any sort of concession for immigrant integration as being essentially couched within a punitive immigration approach, right? So the last immigration reform in 65, Immigration Reform and Control Act included greater immigration enforcement, law enforcement. It included the illegalization of work, criminalization of hiring undocumented immigrants, and then there was a legalization prong, but it was two of the three prongs were punitive, and the third one was a legalization program. Any sort of reform that has come since then has had that same model of punishing a group of people and then providing some concession of protection. You think back to the Obama administration, his time in office. We had DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That was a concession, but it was within an era of the highest rates of deportation that we've ever seen in recent history, right? The fact that he had the moniker deporter in chief, right? So one of the things that I really hope that we can do is think about an integration agenda that is separate from enforcement. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's especially possible given the recent election, but there needs to be a sort of reckoning that integration of those people, whatever the percentage is, over 80% of people who have been in the U.S. undocumented for more than 15 years, there needs to be an integration agenda. All these mixed status families, U.S.-born children of legally precarious parents and immigrant communities, there needs to be an integration agenda. And it doesn't, one of the arguments I make in my book is that it doesn't need to come from the highest rungs of the government. We really need to start asking immigrant communities on the ground, what does integration mean to you? What is it that you need to experience integration in because people aren't experiencing integration to an American society, broadly speaking. It's integration in Los Angeles County or in the Central Valley of California, in the Bay Area, right? So thinking about localized integration policies and programs that would really move that agenda forward and have that be separate from whatever the enforcement agenda is. But then enforcement really needs to look at what are the root causes of migration. So my book really covers the story of child migration and child labor in the U.S. from the point of displacement to that sort of hopeful end, which is if we were to ask young people, what do you need? These are the things they would say.
And of course, not to end on a sad note, but I guess I am, Trump's, picks of Stephen Miller, a blatant unapologetic white supremacist, and Thomas Homan, a former cop who was the main proponent of the separation of families and the caging of children. It's signaling a pretty hardline kind of approach with some unintended consequences, I would assume. Want to speak on that?
I think whatever consequences we see will be fully intended. I think that's where we're at. Something that sociologists have, Cecilia Menjivar and Lacey Abrego, who are sociologists at UCLA, coined this term legal violence. It is harm against immigrant communities that is written into the law, the design of laws and policies. It is violence against people that is fully legal, it is authorized, and therefore it is normalized and deemed inherent, right? Just like not providing reparations for Black Americans in the U.S., you see high rates of poverty, you see high rates of unemployment, and you say, well, that is inherent because the law is supposedly neutral, right? And that is legal violence, this poverty and these conditions that we see across the U.S. So I don't think the consequences, maybe there will be some unintended ones, but I think many will be fully intended.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how these billionaires continue to run their businesses without immigrant labor, trying to figure out how Trump plans to keep food prices low without immigrant labor, trying to figure out how he can keep meat plants running without immigrant labor. A lot of people don't agree with me on that. That's fine. That's what I mean when I say unintended consequences. Dr. Stephanie Canizales, right. I appreciate the conversation. Hope we'll get a chance to talk again. Let us know how we can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me at stephaniecanizales.com or just a quick Google search. I hope I'm all over your internet.
All right. Thank you so much for the conversation this morning.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Look, Tavis Smiley is not feeling well right now. Pray for his elevation. He'll be, Dr. Nicolai Corte will be in for him, and he's got a great show on deck for you. I'm going with Fannie Lou Hamer. She says, nobody's free until we're all free. Like my mama used to say, history is now, and we are making it together. Until tomorrow, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know from BIN News. The Kremlin denies that President-elect Trump and President Putin spoke after the U.S. election, calling reports of the call pure fiction. News sources had claimed Trump advised Putin not to escalate the war in Ukraine. Republicans are closing in on maintaining control of the House. According to NBC News, the GOP is 5 seats away from the 218 needed to control the lower chamber. President Biden says the country has a sacred obligation to those who have served and their families. He marked his final Veterans Day as Commander-in-Chief at Arlington National Cemetery Monday morning. He and Vice President Harris took part in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And veteran homelessness rates are down to a record low. The Biden administration announced on Veterans Day that there were less than 33,000 homeless veterans as of January 2024. That's more than a 55% decrease since 2010. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice: continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
Is this the tackle? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Rams couldn't find their offense Monday night against Miami. They lost 23-15 at SoFi. No touchdowns for possessions without a touchdown. The Bears haven't scored a touchdown since October 27th at Washington. The NFL's 6 black head coaches have some work to do after Week 10.